As a mutual fund distributor, we manage hard-earned money of our investor. And that's why I think it is most important that we have a very high ethical standards for ourselves so that we are respected in the market. Today, most of the financial advisors are treated just like another agents, which are just for transaction basis. But if you want to be treated with more respect, like any other profession, then you should have a very high ethical standards. And today in this video, I am going to discuss with you 5 important steps which you can take to be having a very high moral and ethical ground. Hello everyone, I'm Shobhit. I'm a FinBiz growth expert on a mission to help 1 lakh financial entrepreneurs to diversify their business into mutual fund. And in case still you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, do hit the subscribe button. Now let's come back to the subject. Now why it is important to maintain a very high ethical standards? Because as I told you, we are dealing with a very important, our most important aspect of our client, which is their hard-earned money. So first we need to set example ourselves so that the investors with whom we are dealing with, they are also respecting us. So the first thing which I want you to set are very clear in the mindset of you and your client that the kind of return expectation you are building while talking to or interacting with your client. Now, I have worked for more than a decade in mutual fund industry. I have worked with names like HDFC and UTI Mutual Fund. And what here I realized is most of the time when a mutual fund distributor interact with client, they start with the argument of what kind of return the scheme has generated, how good that scheme performance had been in last 3 years, 5 years or 10 years. But most of the time what we forget is all the returns which has been given by any particular scheme is only the past performance, and future is always uncertain and subject to market risk. So instead of talking about the returns of the scheme, we need to talk about the investment approach which we are going to take, and always discuss in the form of portfolio investments and not any particular investments. So in case, just to give you example, suppose you are talking to a client that how good the scheme has been performing, and say it has given say 12%, 15% or 20% return over 3 or 5 years time period, your client take those returns as an reference point. And even 1 or 2% deviation plus or minus from those returns are not taken well by the client. So what we need to keep in mind, is whenever you are advising your client, the first thing you need to do is never discuss any particular scheme, because you are going to help your client to have a proper investment approach to the investment. And we as a mutual fund distributor cannot say that one scheme is going to define or help or structure his whole life financial plans. So just keep in mind that we need to have an approach to invest clients' money into multiple schemes. And once you take a portfolio approach, then automatically any reference to any particular scheme performance becomes not so important, okay, or immaterial. Other important thing which you need to keep in mind is we are not there to manage the return of the client. We are there to advise our client to continue in their journey to meet their financial goals. We are there to anchor their emotional volatility. So how we are going to handhold our client, we are going to motivate our client, we are going to encourage our client to continue in that journey and advise whenever they are about to deviate from the preconceived or defined goals. So if we keep that aspect in mind, that I think we will be on a very different plane. Most of the mutual fund distributors today in the market, they don't understand that they are not a broker. They are a mutual fund distributor who are going to help their client in meeting their financial goals. And if that is the case, we need to be very mindful of the way we are communicating to our client. सो आपको ये बहुत समझना जरूरी है कि जब भी आप क्लाइंट से बात करें, आप कोई एक पर्टिकुलर स्कीम के बारे में ना बात करें। आप एक पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टमेंट के बारे में बात करें जहां पे उसको आप मल्टी एसेट्स इन्वेस्टमेंट का सजेशन देंगे, जहां पे इक्विटी भी होगा, डेट भी होगा, गोल्ड भी होगा, ताकि उसके पोर्टफोलियो की वॉलेटिलिटी हमेशा कंट्रोल में रहे। आप क्लाइंट को रिटर्न का एक्सपेक्टेशन बिल्ड ना करके एक प्रॉपर इन्वेस्टमेंट एडवाइस देंगे तो ये आपके लिए और आपके क्लाइंट दोनों के लिए बहुत अच्छा होगा। The second thing which I think you should keep in mind is defining well in the start of your relationship regarding all the services which you are going to provide and what is the turnaround time which your client can expect. Now, what I mean by that, you should be very clear with your client that you are a mutual fund distributor and you are not going to tell him which stock to buy. Now, in India, since we have been never taught on the subject as how we should manage money, it is only perceived that we are going to advise at which stock to buy, which stock to sell, which scheme to buy, which scheme to sell. But what we need to understand and define our scope of service from the very beginning so that client expectation is also in check. You need to tell your client that you are not a tax expert. You need to tell your client that you are not a stock broker who is going to help him in picking, buying stock or scheme. You are a mutual fund distributor who is going to help them in building a long-term, a well risk-adjusted return portfolio. तो आपको अपने क्लाइंट को बताना है कि अगर उन्होंने आपको एक इन्वेस्टमेंट दिया है तो आप उनके पास कितने दिन के बाद उनके इन्वेस्टमेंट का अपडेट लेके जाएंगे, कितने दिन में क्लाइंट को यूनिट अलॉट होगा, how much time it will take to client to know at what price he got the investments and when you are going to update him regarding that. Same way, you need to be clear from day one and you need to communicate to your client that in case whenever the client wants to withdraw the money, what is the process to be followed, how you are going to help him, and when he can expect his money back in the bank account. Any non-financial transaction, suppose your client wants to change the address, your client wants to change the nominee, your client wants to are not happy with any one particular scheme and he wants to switch to another scheme. All those things you should have from day one, the predefined turnaround time in your mind, and the same thing has to be communicated to your client. Once you do that, you are going to be a much different and much sophisticated, much informed mutual fund distributor than any other mutual fund distributor in the market. And it is going to make a very good impression of you in the eyes of your investor. Just remember this one code. Everything about you is going to tell something about you. So in the way you are going to present, what kind of service you are going to provide and what is the expectation your client should have from you, then will create altogether a different kind of your image in the eyes of your investor. And always keep this mantra in your head that you should be the first person to call your client regarding any service issue and not the other way around. So if you have promised that you are going to inform or meet your client or your investor on such at that particular date, at particular time, you should be the person who is going to contact your client and your client should not be waiting for you. Just remember, if the time is fixed at 5 p.m., it should not be 5:01 and it should not be in your head that 10 minutes is a very obvious thing which you can deviate from the time which you have set. Because as I told you, everything about you is going to tell something about you. So if you have fixed a time 5 o'clock, make sure that you are there at 5 o'clock, not 4:50, not 5:10. and that is going to create a long-term impact and create a very high standards for you. The third thing which I would like you to keep in mind is you should have a very well defined advisory approach when you are meeting your client. So if you are meeting your client as a mutual fund distributor, you should be very clear in your head how you are going to guide your investor for meeting their financial goals. Whether you are going to take an approach that first you are going to understand the client requirement, what is the goal, for what purpose he is going to invest, and then you are going to do a proper risk profiling of him. It means understanding what kind of risk he can take while doing his investments, or he can take the risk while doing his investment in various asset classes, and then defining the asset allocation. Now, if some of these terms are not so clear to you, if some of these terms are not well defined in your head, you need to sit back and start working. But more importantly, if you are looking for a structured information, if you are looking for an ecosystem where you can be groomed to be one of the best mutual fund distributor, or if you want to come into the mutual fund industry as a mutual fund distributor, then I would love you to join my 90 minutes free masterclass. In this masterclass, I am going to show you how you can be one of the best mutual fund distributor in the country and start your mutual fund distribution business in 21 days. I am going to leave the link for the masterclass in the description. I would love to see in that masterclass. So you need to follow a process. You need to define the process which you are going to follow while you are going to advise your client. So if you are clear on this, then you are going to set a very high standards for yourself, and that is going to give a lot of credential for you in the market. Okay, and other important thing is whenever you are advising, you should be very particular and you should be hands-on what on the all the schemes, all the asset class for which you are advising your client. I keep on telling my community members, you need to have an elevator pitch for all the schemes which you have shortlisted for your client. Now, elevator speech is what? You should have a 1 minute quick all information about the scheme which you are advising your client. Why you have picked that scheme, what are the things you have looked into it, and why the client should take this advice from you. And it should not be 10 minutes, it should be 1 minute very crisp information which should be communicated to your client in an effective manner. And all those things we are going to teach you in case you decide to join our community. Do join for the free masterclass. So you need to have a very clear-cut advisory process. Other thing very important is whenever you are selecting any scheme for your client, as I told you, you need to have a good elevator pitch. Before elevator pitch you are going to prepare, you should have a very clear-cut scheme selection criteria for yourself, and the same you need to communicate to your client. Just to give you an example, suppose you are selecting any scheme from a particular AMC, that is mutual fund company, you need to tell your client why you are dealing with that particular mutual fund company. Is it because of the promoter or the history of the company or the various credential of the management team? So you should be hands on those all information. Now it is not important or not sufficient that you have only information regarding the scheme which you are pitching to your client, but you should have a 360-degree information regarding all and every aspect of the mutual fund company's scheme. Okay, so start working with first why that mutual fund company, because please remember this thing, return of money is more important than return on your money, especially in India where more than 140 lakh crore of money is in the fixed deposits and people are only seeing the safety of their money. It is very important to make our client comfortable regarding all the investments which you are advising and the lineage of the mutual fund company with whom you are dealing with. So you need to be very clear and you need to be communicating this thing, why that particular AMC, why the particular fund manager, because the race is won by the driver and not the car. So if you are choosing a particular scheme, what is the credential of the fund manager? Why you have choosing that fund manager? What is his performance? How long he has been with that scheme? What is his risk adjusted performance which he is able to generate? ऑल दिस थिंग्स आपके दिमाग में बहुत क्लियर होना चाहिए, आपका होमवर्क बहुत अच्छे से होना चाहिए ताकि आप क्लाइंट को ये सारी चीजें क्लियरली कम्युनिकेट कर सकें. And if you are able to communicate all these things by doing your homework, then you are going to set a very good ethical standard for yourself. So if you are having a very good selection process for the scheme, you will be more confident yourself and you are setting a very high standard for yourself. If you are setting a very high standard for yourself, then your client will be able to see through you that you have done a proper homework, you have set a very high ethical standards for yourself. The same way you need to be very clear why you are selecting that scheme, whether the scheme objective has been withheld for a longer period of time. If the scheme is having an objective to invest in a say small cap fund, whether all the time the fund manager investing in small cap stocks only or not, what are the expense ratios, what are the risk parameters of that scheme, and how it is well defined, and what are the various parameters which you have looked into it while selecting a scheme. So take a top-down approach, select a mutual fund company and fund manager and scheme, and all those information should be hands-on with you so that you can confidently tell your client that whenever scheme you are selecting, you are taking a proper structured approach. If that is the case, then your client will be able to appreciate that you have set a very high ethical standard for yourself. In case up till now you are not following or not doing these steps, just type I didn't in the comment box. I would like to see how candid you are. The last thing which I want you to follow is comply with the rules. Now what this means is, this means that whatever rules the SEBI has given to you or SEBI has given in the media, you need to follow. It should not be followed only in letters but in the spirit also. Don't take shortcuts, because anything which you are going to do which is not according to the rule, it will always give a wrong impression to your client. In short term, you may be getting some business, but in long term, your client will always think that you are a guy who is going to take a shortcut and it doesn't argue well for you. So always keep in mind that whenever you are interacting with your or doing any business with your client, you need to be very mindful of the aspect that all the rules which are given by the mutual fund companies, SEBI and regulators, you follow in spirit and word both. So I hope you got some idea as how to set a very high standard for yourself. If you are able to set a high standard for yourself, then I am very sure that you are going to be perceived at a very different level in the market. And in this business, you are the hero. So if you set a high ethical standard for yourself, you are going to grow in your business. Thanks for joining today. I had a wonderful time discussing this with you. I hope you also enjoyed it. I'm going to see you next time. Thank you very much.